300,000 people live here out of a population of 2 million. The original Paraguayans were Indians who spoke Guarani. They had no metal, no wheel or domestic animals, but they did have a tendency to eat strangers. The first white men, arriving here 3.5 centuries ago, killed the men but bedded the women. So today, 9 out of 10 Paraguayans are mestizos, of mixed Spanish and Indian blood, who work the land, grow tobacco and roll their own. The average income's about 35 shillings a week, and since the bulk of the budget goes to the military, each year 4 Paraguayan men qualify as engineers, 7 as doctors, while in a land where a white skin's rare but idealized, 100 young men become army officers. Young Guarani recruits, most of them illiterate, come to the big city in best denims and unaccustomed shoes to record the moment. In this martial land, the army's always required respect. Paraguayans were once forced to doff their hats to every passing soldier, and country boys, who wore no clothes at all, were obliged to wear hats so they could take them off. In Paraguay, the past not only explains the present, but seems very much part of it. For there's a remarkable consistency in the national story, in this parade of war and poverty. Century after century, the same characteristics reappear, and today's problems are much as they have been during 4 centuries. In 1811, the year after Argentina freed herself from Spain, Paraguay also became an independent republic. Her first dictator, José de Francia, a sinister figure who founded a fashion still popular today by declaring himself El Supremo for life. He held the country in its first homegrown grip of terror, sealed off Paraguay from the outside world, ruled absolutely for 26 years, and so set the Paraguayan pattern. No one believed El Supremo human, it was said, until he proved it by death. A lawyer called Carlos Antonio Lopez followed to become first president, welcomed foreign trade, and in 1858 employed English engineers to build South America's first railway. He sent his son to Europe to buy armaments, and young Lopez picked up not only guns, but a most remarkable mistress, Eliza Alicia Lynch, born in Cork and married at 15, who left her husband and various protectors in Paris to return with the dictator's son. This stunning adventuress became the president's lady and bore him 5 or 6 children. Though snubbed for years by older families, who usually married before their children were born, she dazzled Asuncion by her clothes, her parties, her courage. Finally, she buried Lopez, along with a son, on his last battlefield, and returned to live in Thurlow Place, Kensington. Later, back in Paris, she completed the circle as madam of a brothel and died in poverty. 50 years later, her ashes were returned to Asuncion to be placed in the hero's pantheon. But even in this dictatorial land, there were objections. So today, in a casket in the Military Museum, Eliza Lynch awaits her final acceptance. Her president, Francisco Solano Lopez, had ordered Paraguay's Sacred College to elect him a saint. The vote was unanimous because the 23 members who said no were shot. Fanatic and megalomaniac, he plunged Paraguay into the bloodiest war in South American history, perhaps the bloodiest war the world's ever known. Egged on by Madame Lynch, Lopez decided to fight 3 neighbors at once: Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay. At the beginning of this insane War of the Triple Alliance, Paraguay's population was more than 500,000. After 5 years, the surviving men numbered only 28,746. Those the enemy had not killed had been tortured and executed by their own sadistic president. Before the eyes of Eliza Lynch, Lopez, dictator at bay, was hacked to death. Paraguay, stripped of crops and cattle and 55,000 square miles of territory, was almost wiped out. People still talk of that war as though it happened yesterday. The bloodthirsty Lopez and his greedy, scheming Irish mistress are almost sanctified. The passing of time and a shortage of national heroes has ennobled them. Only Paraguayans who worship ruthless courage could honor such blundering tyrants. Other races would curse their memory for generations. Since then, poor Paraguay has languished under a parade of 34 presidents, all of them instantly forgettable, and today as anonymous as this empty land. This is the Chaco, an Indian word meaning hunting ground, and it's what Paraguay is about. 2/3 of the whole country, an area of wilderness larger than Britain. From the air, an endless ocean of scrub. But when you get down here and step out of the aircraft into the searing, scorching inferno, you find that there is jungle and forest, there's swamp and desert, but mainly thorn trees and giant cacti. It took Paraguay more than half a century to recover from that devastating war of Triple Alliance. And then she found herself engaged in yet another vicious and totally unnecessary war with Bolivia, the Chaco War. Bolivia wanted a river to the Atlantic. Paraguay hoped to find oil here, and by 1932 border skirmishes turned to full-scale war. A fearful place in which to fight. A parched land of dust and drought and disease, of anacondas and lungfish. An airless 110 degrees leaves you breathless, or hot winds coat the eyes. President Stroessner was a young lieutenant in this war of the Green Hell, as the headlines called it, but his role was so undistinguished that today the war's officially played dead. The Chaco was the Paraguayans' last test of courage so far. And there's no doubt that these simple men have a great love for their land, a contempt for death, and a conviction that every one of them's equal to 6 enemies. They were certainly more at home than their enemies in this wilderness, for they knew which plants gave water, while the softer Bolivians down from the hills just couldn't cope with the Chaco. After 3 years, Paraguay won her last war, if you could call it winning, and this land had taken 100,000 lives. So Paraguay, the victors, were awarded 20,000 square miles of this. What a prize. The Chaco has still not been opened up, though today there is some talk of a vast aerodrome here to cope with the supersonic airliners when they arrive, feeding all the local South American states from here. And if supersonic travel means that you've got to come to the Chaco, well, I think it's a very good argument for the return of the steam train, or perhaps even the horse. The Paraguayan character was cast in this dusty oven, today still defended against Bolivians or rebels by a handful of frontier guards without shoes or guns. The peasant army of this people of dignified poverty, ruled by a president who, it's said, has 3 active hates: journalists, foreign journalists, and, worst of all, English-speaking foreign journalists. A ruler who believes, as we'll see in a moment, that a liberal dictator and his Paraguay are soon parted.
Don't get out of rule. We're not bothered by the forces of any kind. We don't even have, I don't guess they even have a sheriff, police station, or a jailhouse in Philadelphia, as far as I know.
So the peaceful Mennonites contentedly farm their small holdings while, on the good land at the other end of the agricultural scale, there are estancias bigger than counties. And 6 million head of cattle, earning most of Paraguay's foreign currency. Half